that's great. We're loading our actual patient data we're getting from our web API, right? But we need to actually now get the doctors as well so we can provide the filtering that we're anticipating doing. Okay, so let me just stop writing. So in step 3 here, first thing we'll do is we're going to get the data for doctors and then we'll use it to filter patients, right? Okay, so let's do some work in our main view model then. Let's make a little more room on the screen here, right? So right now we're just pulling in our patient repository. I'm going to move that to the top where I'm used to usually having it. But along with that, obviously we're going to need the doctor repository as well, which we'll also get from our dependency injection system. One more thing I'm going to add here as well is just a little bit of a Boolean, right, a true false. Do we actually need to refresh the doctor, right? That's something that we don't necessarily have to do. We do it once, and we're going to go on the assumption that we only really need to get it one time. We don't have a lot of change or turnover of doctors in the medical clinic here, so we can leave that the way it is, right? Now for the constructor, now we want to also have our doctor repository from our dependency injection system. And then of course we'll need to actually relate that to our private doctor repository. Just as we knew up a list of patient, we'll do the same thing for doctors. And we're going to set off our assumption here about needing doctor refresh. We'll set that to true. Okay. Now we've got some red underlining there because one thing we haven't added yet is the observable property for our doctors, our list of doctors themselves, right? So we have our list of patients, so we'll add the list of doctors. And, okay, we have our title set. That's good. All right. Now, right now, remember we use that behavior to associate our appearing command, our relay command, to the actual appearing event of the page itself, right? So we need to do a little bit more here. We're going to check, do we actually need to get doctors? And if we do, then we're going to go get them. So we'll use our Boolean there on need doctor refresh to decide that. And then in the else branch of our if-else here, instead of just always calling show patients, what we're going to do is we're just going to set our, we haven't got it yet, so this will be complaining about it, but we're going to set our selected index for our drop-down list. The doctors we're going to choose, we'll put that to 0, right? And that would actually cause then the filter, right, to go and get the related patients. If the index is 0, it will return all patients. That's why we don't need to separately call the show patients. Okay, now to work with our drop-down list, our picker of doctors, we're going to add a couple more observable properties here. One for the selected doctor themselves, that's a doctor object, and an integer for the doctor selected index, right? Setting it to -1, of course, basically clear, so there's nothing selected in the picker itself. Now we do need to handle the event then of choosing a doctor, right? So that will be our selected doctor changed, right? So we'll handle that as just a partial void, and we'll call show patients passing the ID of the doctor. Now it's underlining in red right now because right now it doesn't expect any parameters. So we're going to change it so we can pass a doctor ID to filter by. All right, well, let's go back and get that in place on the main page. So if we go to the XAML of the page itself, right, basically above the list view, we're going to add a label and a picker. Okay, so the label is just filtered by doctors. Our picker, though, we have a number of properties that we're binding here to our view model, right? The item source will be our collection of doctors. The selected item will be our one selected doctor. We added that observable property a moment ago. The display binding, we're going to go with formal name, so it looks good alphabetically sorted by last name and then first name. And then, of course, we're going to bind that selected index to the integer value of the currently selected item in our picker, or drop-down list if you prefer to call it that. Okay. All right, so coming back to the view model then, right? We have a little bit more work to do here. We need to actually have our get doctors in place. We referred to it earlier, but we've got to actually build that. Now the structure for this method is going to be very much the same as what we did for patients. We're just going to go get a list of doctors, of course. Put it below. But notice one thing, it's not a relay command. We don't actually call this from the actual view itself, right? We just call it internally, so to speak, from within the view model when we want to get doctors, right? We'll just go, we set our is busy to true, so our activity indicator will show if there's any time delay in getting the data from the web API. And we just go, when we get our doctors, we add our prompt at the top with the index ID of 0, or the ID of 0, I should say. Do the order by on formal name, because we actually have all the data now, so we can just use that summary property. And then need doctor refresh, we'll set that to false, right? So again, we're going on the assumption the only time we're going to refresh our list of doctors is when we first start the application running. And then we just set the index to 0, which will, of course, will trigger any filtering that was required, basically triggering going to go and get the patients. Okay, so let's go back up now to the show patients, right? It's not happy at the moment because we want to be able to pass, for filtering, a nullable integer for the doctor ID. We'll make it a nullable because we might want to just pass null. We don't have a doctor ID to filter by. The only other change we have to do here is inside the try, right? Yes, sometimes we want to just go and get all the patients, okay? But not always. So we're going to have our decision structure here. I'm going to stick with an if. So if our doctor ID, if we actually have a value and it's greater than 0, then we're going to go and get our patients by using the get patients by doctor method from our patient repository. Now, we're going to just put this in the else branch. We don't need to always do it then. I'm just going to move it basically into an else of our decision structure. And that's the only change we need to make to the actual show patients as well, right? Okay. We're going to add one more relay command here, right? So instead of just directly calling show patients when we click our refresh button, I think it's probably better to simply set the selected index to 0 and then let the actual event of changing the selected index, basically, take care of refiltering our patient list, right? So along with that, we'll go back to the actual main page and just change the command here in our toolbar item, okay? Instead of binding to show patients, because now it has the parameter, right? We'll just bind it to our refresh data command that we annotated as a relay command. So that's why we have the word command at the end. And that should be it. That should take care of our getting the doctors, showing them in the picker, and then setting up so we can filter by that drop-down list of doctors themselves. So let's just do a quick run here, make sure it's actually doing what we want it to do. And there we go. Okay, so we get all the patients at first. Now I can choose a doctor. Gregory House, whoever I want, Charles Xavier, etc., or one of the other ones, it doesn't matter. And if I go back to select a doctor, there we go. Now we're back to all of the patients in the system. Excellent. All right. So the next step, obviously, is to fill in the missing parts, and that is be able to do CRUD operations. So we're going to do that in a moment.